Alrighty, so I would like to introduce our wonderful speakers that we have here today. We have a really, powerhouse women here today, and so we have here Kristian Ricusso from she's a database administrator at the Frontier Science. Kristian is a member of the Tuscarora and Oneida tribes. She grew up on the Tuscarora Indian Reservation. Attended Houghton College for pre-law, but eventually studied computer science at UB and computer information systems at Buffalo State College. Most of her career, she has been in the nonprofit sector, working for the environmental protection, social justice, and LGBTQ rights. She's a former vice president of Pride Buffalo and former president of PFLAG, and she was a freelance writer for Curve magazine. And right now, she has been working at the Frontier Science Foundation for 26 years, and is the company's database administrator, leading the database operations group. She sits on several technical committees at the Frontier and the steering committee. And the Frontier Science is the data management center for several international clinical trial groups, including the NIH-sponsored HIV, AIDS clinical trials, NCI, International Breast Cancer Studies Group, and other sponsored trials. And their statistical center is at the Harvard School for Public Health. And there are 3 offices in the US and 2 affiliate offices, one in Scotland and the other one in Greece. And she currently lives in Snyder with her wife, Ginny, and they are 2 crazy pups, Wheezy and Harley. Here next we have Dr. Jacqueline Malcolm. She's a CIO and VP for Enrollment, Marketing, and Communications at SUNY Buffalo State College. Dr. Malcolm oversees instructional design and training, enterprise information systems, enterprise applications, technology support services, operations, project management, institutional research, oh my God, marketing, communications, admissions, financial aid, and registrar. She spends her free time, whatever is left after, volunteering as a member of various IT boards and advisory committees, sharing her non-traditional path to leadership. Wow. So next we have Amber Lundy. She's a senior user experience designer at Amazon. Amber is a multi-model user experience designer who has worked on various machine learning-driven experiences at Raytheon, Apple, and Amazon. Her background is in industrial design, communications, and mixed media arts. Most recently, her project, Alexa Show and Tell, won Voice Design of the Year 2020 by answering the question, Alexa, what am I holding? For blind and low vision customers looking to identify products with their Echo device. Her focus is on trends in cyberculture and emergent transmedia, where she is transmedia when she isn't sewing, gardening, cooking, or spending time outdoor with her family. And next we have here Sara Tanbakuchi. She's a senior technology manager at MIT Tech Strategy and Governance. And Sara's career has followed a non-traditional trajectory from techs to tech. Sara is a senior technology manager at MIT. She leads the technology strategy and the governance team. In this role, she manages a team that designs and executes support services that enable a well-managed technology function while also leading the refinement and delivery of key technology transformation initiatives. Sara joined MIT in 2015 and previously led MIT's traditional third-party risk program, one of 2 enterprise-wide programs designed to analyze and control against the risks presented by engaging third parties. Before joining MIT, she worked as a federal tax attorney. Sara received her law degree and MBA from the University at Buffalo. And last but not the least, we have Saidurga Subramanian. She's a lead software developer at the Liazon / Willis Towers Watson. And Saidurga has a broad engineering background and experience including electronics hardware, machine learning, embedded software, and web development. She did her bachelor's in electronics and instrumentation engineering and master's in electrical and computer engineering. Saidurga started her career as a graduate researcher in machine learning in San Diego State University and has worked as an embedded software engineer at Qualcomm for the Microsoft team and electronics engineer at Peregrine Semiconductors. Saidurga is a machine learning enthusiast and have published papers and research projects. When she's not solving problems, she's enjoying playing the piano. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so I shared a little bit of information about you, your background, but I want to hear from you now in your own words. Can you share a little bit about your story? What brought you into the technology and the innovation space? How you ended up here?
Let's see, well, I started out pre-law. I eventually found myself mostly working for nonprofits, not in law, but just working for nonprofits. And as you know, anybody that's in the nonprofit world, it's hard to find healthcare. So my sister, yes, okay. My sister was actually at Frontier Science before me as a data manager, and I said, you know what, I need to get a job that has healthcare. Wound up at Frontier Science, and absolutely just fell in love with everything that was going on there. At the time I had, before coming there, I'd been with ACT UP, trying to get funding, Ryan White funding, all that type of stuff. So I actually got to see everything coming into action. Eventually found myself in our database group, and I felt home. Everything made sense to me. It's kind of that aha moment. You're like, oh, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. I've been there 26 years, and we've just grown tremendously. We've been around since 75, 1975, I have to say that now, right? But we really, there's a few, I see some past folks. I see Lena over there. So we have a number of Liazon. You probably have a number of our ex-employees. So we have folks that have gone there. But we have to, with the amount of data that we have with all the different trials, we've just continually kept growing with the need, with the technology needs, with the deliverables we need to get. And right now we have so much data. We're really working on translational research, getting those cures faster. I'm sure we're going to be on the front line with the data that's coming from the coronavirus. So we're working on different contracts. We just got a big contract with NCI for another cancer study. So it's good to be at a place where I'm technologically challenged. I'm also developing my staff and bringing the new level of people up, and getting people in leadership positions at business continuity. I work a lot with Ramona over here. I'll give you a shout out with the CIS. She has got great interns. We have an amazing one this year that everybody's been crazy about, so I do try to develop students as they come up. So.
Hi, everyone. Oh, that's not convincing at all. Hi, everyone. I know it's coronavirus, but we'll get through it. It's okay. Hi. Good. So everybody's alive. That's a good thing. So again, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Malcolm. I have a very non-traditional path to tech. So my background is in enrollment, marketing, communications, and didn't enter tech into, I think I was early in my 30s. Not going to share my age. But I kind of stumbled into it. That was my path. I do not have a formalized degree in CIS or MIS or any of the other ISs or ITs. But I do have a strong strategic leadership background. And so my story basically into tech revolves around the fact that I was onboarding a portal system, right? And so I was the marketing person at the time, and I was like, So as a marketing person, I do a lot of research. I like to make sure I understand and know what I'm going to be marketing. So I said, can I sit in on the trainings? They said, sure. And a good friend of mine was project manager at the time, and I said, well, who's going to be your portal administrator? And he was like, we don't know. And I was like, okay, well, how can I be helpful? And so as a marketing person, I wound up taking on being the functional admin for this portal system, which then meant I actually built the system. So I, had a long-term fight with Boolean logic, but, I was like, if not, then what am I doing? No. But so, as a marketing person, you're just like, what am I doing? What is happening with my career? And really, when I really delved into it, I absolutely loved it. And when I realized I was starting to take pictures of a redesigned data center, I was like, this is beautiful. I'm like, what is happening with me? This is very odd. And so I really had a love for tech at that point. I had an opportunity to have really, really great people around me. That's something that is really important to growth in your career. Folks who would just sit and help me learn. And part of my process in being a portal administrator was, I remember the first time I had to bounce a server, I was sweating. I was like, I'm going to break it. And the person who was with me like, Jackie, command line, not going to break it. It's okay. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but okay, And so, but again, just having really strong people around me. And so that was sort of my entree into IT as a sysadmin. Did that for a number of years, was exposed to data center projects and redos and other things. And, when I got my doctorate in 2017, I was like, I think I'm ready for a change. And so happened to just cursory be looking for a job. And this job comes up at Buffalo State. So I remember I called my friend and I said, okay, so there's really unique job here. And I was like, oh, but it's in Buffalo, And she was like, it's great. My brother lives there, And I knew nothing about Buffalo to even have that statement, but, it's cold. And so I was like, I've been in Nebraska and Wisconsin, so I'm not, immune to knowing about the cold, but I was like, oh, it snows all of the time. But anyway, I went to the interview and was sold. Absolutely fell in love with the school, fell in love with my team. I have amazing leaders on my team. I couldn't have asked for anything better. They challenged me every day. And so that's sort of my story. And in the midst of doing all of it, I'm a single mom of 3 kids. I have 16-year-old twins who are about to be 17. Oh my goodness. So there's that. And then I have a daughter who just became a teenager as well. So she's 13. And I have a son who's autistic. So I've learned a lot about learning from others and patience and really making sure that you really understand. We talk about diversity and inclusion. It is one of the things that makes me very, very aware of how we treat other people. Because, having a son who's on the spectrum, it's really important for his voice to be heard, that his strengths be seen, and that he can be at the table. And so that's my story.
Hi, I'm Amber Lundy. The way I got into tech and innovation, I was born into a family that moved countries a lot, and I watched a lot of people adapt to new environments with different kinds of technology, which I found kind of fascinating. And it just so happened that my dad was a mechanical engineer, so there were all kinds of weird things floating around our house that I played with growing up. And then at some point we moved back to the United States, and I didn't quite get the culture. It was actually the biggest culture shock of any country move I'd ever had. And all my friends were overseas. It was quite expensive to stay in touch with them in the early 90s. As a little kid, had no money to pay for international phone calls, so I kind of figured out the free ways to do it myself online, which got me into quite a bit of trouble at some point. And then I was told to do something more effective with my life, like go to college. So I went to college after that, followed the judge's orders. And then I found design that way. I studied industrial design. But my professors were always kind of nudging me towards UX because I had a lot of interactions and interfaces built into my designs. So I used my networking and telephony background from security to get a internship at Raytheon WebSense. Started working on malicious threat detection, modeling, and stuff like that. Some engineers left there. They recruited me to a startup where we were working on sentiment analysis and other kinds of machine learning classifiers on cameras and stuff. And then I went to Amazon from there. Went to Apple, and then quickly went back to Amazon. And I feel really fortunate that I've been able to finally find some teams where I can focus my skill set on stuff where people actually find technology useful, like the last project that was mentioned, focusing on making products for people with disabilities. So those are the things that I find fascinating about technology now, so I'm going to stick with it.
Great, thanks. Hi, so Sara Tempeh. I think if you would have told me 10 years ago, or even when I graduated from law school, that I was going to be working in technology, let alone being a member of a technology leadership team at a bank, I probably would have laughed at you and said you're out of your mind. So I definitely follow another sort of non-traditional path, but my route there has a lot of twists and turns, but in each twist and turn I learned something new. So I had these great opportunities professionally in Buffalo, so I'm born and raised. I also didn't think I would stick around, but it kept getting great chances from a professional perspective. But I wasn't super deliberative, or
conscious about my choices, right? So when I graduated from law school, the legal profession was still recovering from the recession. And so I had the opportunity to work at a great firm. And they said, corporate law or tax law, pick. And I said, well, I like the people who work in tax better, so let's give that a shot. I had never taken a tax class, but it worked out. I learned a lot, but after some time as an attorney, about a year or so, I said, you know what, this isn't the right fit for me. So I'm going to take that MBA and transition to the business world. Landed in corporate services, took on a couple roles there, and ultimately got to the point where I managed our third-party risk program. So how do we make sure that we engage vendors that are safe to do business with? And I was getting great experience, but when I stopped and stepped back and reflected, I realized that, I wasn't asking myself the question of, is this really what you want to do? Like, you spend so many hours at work, so much time away from your friends, away from your family, and I didn't feel like I was truly making a meaningful impact. So luckily, I work at a place that's super supportive about making sure their team members land in the right spot. And so I had a lot of conversations, and one of them happened to be the last conversation, actually, with Mike Whistler, our CIO at M&T. And he explained to me this role. He's like, nobody's going to really have the experience for this. And this is totally new. But he explained this vision for the bank. He explained this vision for technology. And he also talked about a vision that the bank was going to buy into for the totality of the community. Because, and it was one of those experiences where I walked out of the meeting and I said, it doesn't matter what the job entails. I want to do this. I felt inspired. I felt a lot of passion because I truly believe in this community. And what was talked about was an investment to invigorate the bank, invigorate tech, continue all the great work that's going on in the community. And I said, sign me up. And luckily, I also had a senior leader at the time who had shared this story about a time where she was offered a role that felt out of her depth, and she was someone who was super competent, and I couldn't believe that she could feel this way. And she said, I just took that leap. Like, I felt uncomfortable, so that meant I had to take that leap. So that story was in my background. This role presented itself in tech, and I said, I am going to take this leap because I believe passionately in the work and what the team is doing. And so here I am, a year and a half later, and I get to be with all these wonderful women and talk about this and all that's going on, and it's just such a privilege. And that's my story of how I ended up in tech right now. And so I manage a lot of the operational aspects of technology that enable us to work as a well-managed tech shop. And every day is exciting, every day is different. So that's my story.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming here today. So there are actually a lot of factors that played an important role why I'm here today. I started accessing computers when I was 5, just for playing video games. And my brother used to bring pirated CDs. We played all kind of video games. And I thought I was going to be a game developer. But my parents are also into STEM, and they were encouraging me to get into this field. And I was challenged most of the times by my granddad, who was an electrical engineer. He used to remove all the parts, and he asked questions like, do you know how the fan works? Do you know how a motor works? When I was in the age 7. So I had no idea what he was talking about. But he leaves me to think about it for a day or two, and then he answers things for me. I didn't understand, but at that time I was sure that I was going to do something like this. So for me, it kind of started relatively early. And after that, when I was in the middle school, my brother was already doing projects, robotic projects. He was in a lot of clubs, and I was kind of inspired. And I saw at that time, if someone came and talked about programming, I would not have been interested. But to see some moving parts, I was actually very much interested in tech at that point. Then I came here to the US to do masters in electrical and computer engineering at San Diego State. And after that, I worked with Qualcomm and Petitgrain Semiconductor. So I was in the semiconductor industry for a few years as an embedded software developer. Also, I was doing machine learning projects. So what really inspires me is anything that you could do using tech. For example, I had a Microsoft Kinect at home, and I ended up using that for project, for gesture recognition robots. So I think whatever you feel or whatever you want to do with tech, you can accomplish it. So that's what keeps me moving. And today I'm working for Liazon as a web developer, and it's really interesting. that's my story.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your stories. This is hearing all your journeys, hearing about your journeys to where you're at today is extremely inspiring. And I think I spoke to a couple of people here in the audience today that are in that kind of like in a similar spots with a few people here in the panel where they in the middle of their career journey and they're just like trying to figure out what to pursue next, maybe, you know, creative tech paths in life. And it's just, I want to kind of reiterate the message that I heard, right? It's never too late to get in the tech field, right? You can always learn the new skill, new technology, no matter if you might be starting when you're 7, maybe when you're starting when you're 37, so it doesn't matter, it's all good, it's never too late. And it's good to be uncomfortable, right? I like to repeat this phrase, you gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's just like good, get used to it, and if you're uncomfortable, that means you're learning, you're getting out of your comfort zone. We have a very, diverse stories here. Some of you live in Buffalo all your life. Some of you are transplants, just like spend just a couple of years in Buffalo, and where you spend 5 months. 5 months in Buffalo. All right. So, I think, feel free to answer to the best of your abilities this question. How do you feel the Buffalo Tech and Innovation community changed in the past 5 years? And what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I always get first pick on this. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about this before. I mean, it really has changed, I would say, drastically. I mean, when I came to Frontier, it was 94. There was no World Wide Web. There was, I tell people that, they're like, what? But, it was Kermit and FTP and I have on my desk, I have a 5 1/4 inch floppy for my, my mug. But it's wonderful to see where things are at. It's wonderful seeing the interns that I have coming in, and they're just turned on their side, and they're passionate, and things are moving quickly. You hear, if you've been to conferences, you hear about the Internet of Things and edge technology and all the stuff that's out there just in this room alone, how much we have. And the pace that it's at right now, it is just flying. I was worried about Buffalo for a while there. Just seeing, in the last 5 years, I mean, M&T and all of that, Liazon, and when you started out, you did take a bunch of our people. I'm not going to let that go. But trained y'all in ETL and that. But it's good to see that. It was good to see, because I never stopped my staff. If you want to go to another position, you want to go to another company, I will write you a letter, get people where they need to be. And we've just grown tremendously. It's stuff like this. It's the conversation, and it's this type of stuff happening, supporting each other. Not trying to get ahead, and it's sharing that information. We have a small office at the Center of Excellence, and that alone has proven just how much communication builds things. Working with Dr. Jean Morris over there, and just one connection, another connection, it's building. And I'm looking forward to the next 10 years. I can't even predict, because I think it is moving quite quickly.
So I'll add, since I'm relatively a newbie, so I've been here for almost 2 years. So I liked it, I stayed. But I think for me, what I see, I work with the local CIOs. I work with Mike Whistler from M&T Bank, and it's really nice to see the local CIOs really acknowledging the need for us all to work together, because at the end of the day, we're not competing against the technology. We're all using the same things, trying to get to the same places. And so we frequently are having conversations about really building the tech pool within Buffalo, and how can we be a really great tech hub in that regard. And so it's nice for a certain person like me at an entity like Buffalo State College, which traditionally would have never been at the table. So they're looking at us and all the different institutions as really folks that can help them with build that talent pool. The reality is we already recruit them from around the state and other areas, and they're already here within Buffalo, and they're immensely talented and passionate and have a desire to learn. And so it's amazing to see that, you know, I can be at the table with M&T Bank and Kaleida Health and all of the other large organizations and know that they value us being at the table. And so that's an amazing thing for us to do. And they have internship programs and other things like that. And to be able to say, you know, I'm always sort of emailing Ramona and other people. I'm like, oh, I got another one. Just because it's just a tremendous opportunity to link our students up to some of these organizations that really value them and the talent that they can bring. So to be able to grow the pool, hopefully have them stay within Buffalo and the surrounding areas is really important. So that's what I see, is that real collaboration between sort of these divergent yet diverse organizations.
I've only been here for 5 months full time, like Lena was saying, but I've had my eye on Buffalo for about 6 years now, ever since I met my husband, who's from the area. And I actually convinced him to come back here with me after keeping an eye on it. Originally, I was up in Seattle, dragged him up there with me, and I kept moving him around, and we were looking for community long term, and he has friends and family here. And I kept seeing these things about Buffalo in the news, and eventually we ended up in Silicon Valley, and I was like, how do we escape Silicon Valley long term? And I kept seeing more about Buffalo, and it just got to a point where I have to stop sending you articles, we just have to move there and do it. So we moved here, and, you know, here for the long term, laying down roots. And yeah, that's what I've seen, lots of buzz. The time is ripe, so I'm super excited. But. Oh, 5-10 years, isn't that another question? Are we all going to get a chance at that? Same question? Oh, next 5-10 years? Oh, it's a two-part question. The next 5 to 10 years, I think there's probably going to be a lot more folks such as myself and other techies looking to transplant to a place where there's a community who's invested long-term and not somebody that's looking to just create a startup and exit as soon as possible, which is kind of the trendy thing in some locations. I think this community here has a ton of exciting stuff to offer between the colleges, the diversity that exists here naturally, like the use cases and the solutions and challenges that the 21st century of technology should be focusing on naturally exist in this kind of community. They don't exist in like Silicon Valley. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this community solves those things and comes together on that front.
So I see that there is a real recognition right now that cities like Buffalo are in second-tier cities, right? That we're in a race for relevance. Like when we think about economies now and economies that will be successful, we are evolving our understanding that tech and innovation is really the competitive advantage. And so I see, you know, whether it is the city of Buffalo talking about their race for place, or it's the way our local communities, the colleges, the education sector, or companies are talking about it, we recognize that in order for us to succeed, we have to create this place, this ecosystem that's going to attract, engage, and retain this, what people call creative class talent. So the technologists, the engineers. And when I think about 5 years down the road, we recognize that the creation of ecosystems is key to the city's success. So I think about where we're sitting right now, right? And I think of the work that's going on at the other end, at Seneca One, and the space that we're creating there around collisions, technology, and innovation. And what I envision is this technology and innovation corridor that runs from Seneca One all the way up to the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus and places like this that we have here, filled with people who are excited, engaged, they're technologists, they're entrepreneurs, they're innovators of all types and professions. And then hopefully we're seeing that radiating outwards as well, right? So that when we think of this success, it's success from a perspective that's diverse, it's inclusive, and it's equitable. So that is my vision. And I say that, and it's not just my vision, right? It's a collective community vision, but it's something that I think like Buffalo has no choice but to evolve that way in order to succeed and stay relevant.
So I moved to Buffalo like 2 years back. So at the time, like my husband had to move to Buffalo for his residency, and I was contemplating to move to Toronto because I used to think that Buffalo doesn't have a good tech scene. That was my thought. But after exploring more and talking to people in Buffalo, looks like it's in the period of called revitalization. So I was really excited about it, and I finally decided to move to Buffalo, and I also got the right opportunity. And I think most of them covered all the points, but I also see like a lot of new innovative startups, new entrepreneurs raising in Buffalo in the past at least couple of years that I have been here. And what I foresee is like, so Buffalo is a place where there's like a lot of medical research going on. And 2020 to 2025 is all about like healthcare and technology. So I'm thinking Buffalo is going to be a place where there are going to be healthcare tech startups coming up, and also like startups in the area of mixed reality, immersive reality, because like, you know, if you think about like Silicon Valley companies, they're like big companies, but most of the times their R&D division is like has a different meaning. So it's either like feature enhancements or enhancing their existing products. But in smaller cities that are like upcoming, like Buffalo, that's where like most of the innovation and new innovative projects and ideas originate from. So in my vision, I'm seeing like a lot of new innovative tech startups to be coming in Buffalo in the next 5 years.
Vision for 5 to 10 years. I'll take it from a higher ed perspective. We are slow to move when it comes to technology. We certainly don't move as quickly as some of the banks and the other entities, but I think what it does is really help to drive innovation. You know, we're an institution that is, you know, having challenges like any other institution has, right? So there's an enrollment decline within the state of New York and surrounding geographic areas, so we're dealing with that. There's other factors that we deal with as an institution. What we're finding is technology helps to drive that innovation and change. And so I think that'll continue to do that for our space. I think it is forcing us to move much more quickly than we're used to and that we are comfortable with sometimes. And so it's a space that I think, you know, I mean, I made light of coronavirus and I'm not making light of it in its truest sense, but, you know, we are now working through a process where we have just moved literally today announcing that we're going to be fully online. And for an institution like ours, which, you know, we're an on-ground, on-prem institution, right? And so for us, that's a bit different. We do some online programming and things like that, and so it's not completely unknown to us, but it is literally pushing us into a different type of space. And so it's exciting to think that something like this can drive that type of change, but these are the things we have to pay attention to and pivot really, really quickly. So I think we'll see not necessarily more of coronaviruses, please, I hope not. But more of the reason why we should be moving into these environments to really help foster teaching and learning in different modalities, right? And so as you know, Gen Z and other folks are coming into the age of, you know, coming into college and really partaking of higher education, they want to do it their way. You know, higher ed is very traditional. We do it a very specific way. Come, we'll teach you. But they're saying, well, yeah, but someone else will as well, and they'll do it the way I want to be able to do that. And so we have to respond to the way the consumers really want to learn. And most of them, a good majority of them, want to learn in an online environment. And it's not all of them, right? But what we know is they want options. So we want to be an institution that can give our consumers options.
Okay, awesome. Can answer it twice. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is all your answers are amazing. I didn't think I can be more inspired about Buffalo, but apparently I can. This is just, can't wait to see what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. So don't want to be the mood killer with the next question, but what do you think currently is the biggest challenge in Buffalo or Buffalo tech innovation community? Or one of the challenges that you recognize?
I think one of the challenges, and I'm going to take my tech hat off and put my marketing hat on, is that I think we have got to do a much better job of selling Buffalo to the folks who aren't sort of used to this type of weather and environment, and just getting out there and helping folks understand what we bring to the table as a city. And I think that's really, really important. How do we work with visitor and center and tourism folks to make sure people understand? So if you're coming from the city, that people don't say, oh, that's the place it snows all the time. I mean, there's that sort of stigma that's out there, and I always tell people this is not Antarctica. I mean, it's not like we're like, we're consistently living with snow. The summers are beautiful here. It's a great opportunity to be outside. We have amazing food choices. I'm a foodie, so that's important to me. The best buffalo wings, of course. And so there's opportunities to sell the city of Buffalo in a different type of a way. I think also, too, helping folks understand, especially if you're interested in tech, the importance of what we're doing as a community to bring tech here in a pretty significant way, and the number of jobs that we're bringing here in a significant way. And I like to think it's affordable still, and in comparison to a lot of other cities. Buffalo is the second largest city after the state of New York in the state of New York. New York is a pretty rural state. I don't think a lot of times people understand that. And so the fact that we're here against lakes and other opportunities, we've got mountains and other things. It's a great place to live, work, and grow, build a family, retire. So it's got a lot of great characteristics. And I think we need to spend a little bit more time selling Buffalo alongside of the number of tech jobs that we're bringing into the community. Oh, you sure can.
So I think when we talk about Buffalo, especially with our recruiting staff, we have this kind of story that we tell where we talk about, we used to tell candidates, like, we have this great job for you, but it's in Buffalo, right? And Jackie, you kind of shared that experience a little bit, right? Right. So we're evolving that conversation to say, like, we have this really great job for you, and it's in Buffalo, right? And I think that goes to very much to your conversation about branding. And I also think, and branding is a really challenging thing, right? But when we think of these cities that are really coming into the landscape as these tech and innovation centers, like I think of Salt Lake City, for example, and Salt Lake City's branding, Silicon Slopes. Instantly, you say that and you know that you're talking about a tech and innovation center that's located next to one of their greatest assets, right? Like the greatest skiing in the world, arguably. So it's kind of figuring out how do you package that up in a really concise, memorable way and then share the story, all of those things that you're saying. Because I believe that the best people on earth are in Buffalo. That's why we're the city of good neighbors.
I'll riff off of those two comments a little bit. And just selling it a little bit more. I think that the city of Buffalo and the weather and the weather people talk about, I think that makes this place uniquely positioned to be an area of invention. I think spending a little bit more time indoors can be a great thing if you're an inventor, right? You get to buckle down and become super specialized and amazing at something if you have a little bit more time inside spending, time on your craft. So I think there's a great opportunity because of the weather. It's not a detractor, and it's beautiful outside for a number of reasons. I also think that the city doubling down on kind of lifestyle choices and amenity kind of things that are happening with redevelopment are a long-term retention benefit for all of those folks who are coming into town. So there's plenty of great selling points about the city of Buffalo, which is awesome.
So I think the challenges in Buffalo are I see two things. One is tech education gap. So there's definitely some brain drain. The courses UB offers are kind of extensive. They offer, if you take electrical engineering, there are a lot of courses that they offer, and the students from UB, most of them kind of prefer to relocate out of Buffalo. And the reason is I feel there is just concentrated area of field and tech in terms of job opportunities in Buffalo. So that's changing as well. So I recently saw a 3D printing startup, a ML-based startup. So that trend is changing as well. But there is definitely some amount of brain drain. That's one of the challenges. And also I feel there is a tech salary gap in Buffalo. Though the cost of living is low in Buffalo, I feel the ratio is kind of different. And that's one of the reasons people fresh grads kind of look at other places and kind of move out of Buffalo. That also goes back to brain drain. So these are two challenges that I see. But also I feel Buffalo has an advantage for innovation. So smaller cities usually, for example, they have a high score for AI readiness. because they can like foresee and they can proactively assess what are the risks and like they can undertake it compared to any other bigger cities. So I feel like the trend is also like changing, and there are like new innovative startups coming up.
I'll put a little positive spin on it, I guess. We only have like about 240 employees, but what I've noticed in the last few years, we've had a lot more people coming in from different areas. We do have a lot of new grads, and that kind of fits. I think we find a little niche for people. Some of the work that we do, some of the positions that we have, they're so specialized that it's kind of hard to find those skills. And for us as a nonprofit, it's hard to afford and compete with the salaries, even locally. So just finding innovative ways for people to use their skills and their technology. But we are definitely seeing more people coming in. My struggle has been training people and then being able to retain them, but we get such brilliant minds here, and I've just seen the talent grow more and more over the years.
Just to add a little bit about promoting Buffalo out there. I used to think that only people in New York City love hitting on Buffalo, but turns out it's just across the U.S. people don't understand Buffalo, right, and what's going on here. And my designer, she recently moved to Arizona, and she was telling me the same stories. Like people say, "Oh my God, Buffalo might be Siberia." So, and I'm like, clearly they've never been to Siberia. But she's doing an awesome job there now, promoting Buffalo to all people in Arizona. So I think people that who lived in Buffalo, who love Buffalo, and kind of had to relocate for whatever reasons, they're going to be doing that grassroots marketing campaign. And one of the days, Buffalo will be it will be cool. So. Amber briefly mentioned about one of the things that she noticed about Buffalo is our diversity and just like having a lot of different like use cases for inclusion and how we there is a lot of opportunity here. But one of the things that I noticed that's lacking in Buffalo is diversity. Buffalo tech community, we're lacking diversity. What do you think we can do to bring more diversity to innovative tech space?
Events like these, and I also think it's not only just calling people into events like these, but reaching out to those communities where we want to find folks. There's a lot of, we're a very small microcosm, a lot of socioeconomic classes very tightly, even divided and that type of thing. My nephew's a good example. He's brilliant. He's going to go in for engineering, but they live on the reservation. There's no phones and there's no easily accessible internet. So it's, reaching out, and that's just a 20-minute drive from here. So I think really reaching out to communities. The Girl Develop It was an awesome program, and I'm glad that you guys, rebirthed into this. This is amazing that, it is that, learning from things and moving forward. But yeah, definitely reaching out to different communities that could use getting people in.
I think one of the major things, and I agree with you, I think events like this are immensely important, but I think also too, talking about our stories, and a lot of times we're, especially women, we feel like, well, I can't do that because I don't check off all 10 boxes. If I only check off 9, I'm not going to go for that 10th box because I don't meet it, and so I'm not going to go apply for that job. And so I think a lot of times we second guess ourselves, and we really have to get out of that space and learn how to really advocate for ourselves. And like I said, I stepped into being a sysadmin, and I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm going for it, and I'm going to do it. And I think a lot of times we're just really not supported in that type of way. So I think that's going to be important for us to advocate for ourselves and advocate for other women as well. networking is hugely important. If there's a role or job that's open, post on your LinkedIn profile, recommend someone. If a searcher or recruiter is out there looking for someone, recommend someone for that. And I think that you can really begin to build diversity in that type of a way as well. I certainly can say, I'm typically the only female in the room, and I'm certainly most of the time the only African American female in the room, and we don't exist highly in tech, and so it's really important for us to foster those relationships. And so whether they're within your ethnic race or whatever that might be, look out, make sure we're supporting each other. The other thing I think it's important to remember that, and thank you to all the gentlemen in the room that are here, because it's important that we want to be able to support each other as females, but we need you as our sponsors and our advocates in the room too. So that's really, really important that we're networking with you and that you are helping to support us. And I think even on our own teams, how do we begin to create leadership opportunities and training opportunities for women to really understand and know that, you can go for it. And, failure is a learning lesson as well. And I think there is something to be said for, learning because of failure. And if you do, that's fine. Step up and keep it moving. Sometimes you make mistakes. And so that's one thing I would advocate in relation to diversity.
I think there's been some interesting movements this last year, seeing the outcomes of states that have tried to legislate diversity into law. California actually had a lot of success by requiring, I think it's at least one female board member. Booyah, just one, right? And next year they're moving on, right? But they've been attracting a lot of talent because of that legislation. So if there's organizations that are willing to create those rules initially to create that diversity coming in the door, that's great. I think one more thing that we should consider is what inclusion really means in your hiring practices. Is your pipeline prepared to hire a blind programmer? Can you hire a deaf UX designer? Are you including these people in your interview process? Are you posting your job in an accessible job posting website? Can they even get to your job on LinkedIn? Those kinds of questions are things that people should be asking about, and making sure your hiring pipeline is prepared to bring that talent in the door is also going to make your institution more ready and prepared to be diverse. You're going to have to implement those tools to make sure that you're accommodating all those different types of talents coming in the door in the first place, which means your workforce is going to be prepared to work with those people because they're familiar with the tools, and it's just going to grow from there.
So we have a technology development program. It's relatively new, and this year, so we have a class that will come in every July. So it's new computer science graduates mostly. And this year we are really excited because right now approximately 28-29% of the class are women, and that's in line with CS graduation rates right now. And that was something that we stepped back and when we reflected on the prior class, we said we want to really make that a priority. But it's one thing to talk the talk, right? The diversity and inclusion and belonging talk at corporations. It's another thing to really ensure the appropriate level of senior leadership buy-in and make that a priority. So what we saw this year, and we're learning as we go, but we had significant buy-in from our HR department, our recruiters, our chief diversity officer went with us to recruiting events. We were much more creative in terms of how we chose to interact and engage with potential candidates. So on campuses, we're getting involved in student clubs. We tapped our own resource groups within the bank, so fantastic group of individuals, and asked them to come with us to their events and share their stories, because to your point, it becomes so important when you think of where you're going to be as a professional to see yourself reflected in that leadership, in that job opportunity. So, it's something we're certainly continuing to learn every day, but making it a priority in that way is so important. And it's something that when we're reflecting, I'm personally very proud of us for the progress that we're making in this space.
So I strongly believe that the inspiration should start early in the pipeline. For example, schoolgirls. A lot of times, the girls are missing accessibility to tech. That's one of the reasons. For example, if you consider boys in school, they have animation clubs or robotics club, and they do fun projects. But girls are somehow resistant towards joining that because they feel like they might not be good at it. But that's not true. For example, in India, there are 46% of women in tech, and in my classroom there was we were half male, half women. But when I came here, I saw that big difference. So we did in India, the thing we did all the schools partnered with the industries, and they did offer like free laptops or free Arduino boards, free Raspberry Pi boards for the kids to play with and to get inspired. So I guess we can have such, like, for example, we have like a lot of meetup groups. We can also get the school students involved in those so that they get exposure and accessibility to tech.
Just riffing off of that, I would love to see local English classes teaching conversational design at some point. Changing curriculum to be a little bit more tech forward in some of those.
I also want to add having proper role models is also really important for younger generations growing up. That's something with Inclusive Tech Buffalo. One of the reasons why we're focusing on adults is to build those role models so that way the younger generations have, exposure to, women, different diversity in a tech field, right? So not just, just creating that example and showing that it's possible, right? You don't have to fit the certain criteria to be in tech. I think that's also really important. And as an organization, we collaborate with a lot of other groups and clubs that focus on the younger kids to create those partnerships and, again, promote, kind of like pass on that message to the kids that are growing up and, start thinking about what they're going to do when they finish the high school. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you're all well-traveled, you've probably seen what's going on outside of Buffalo. What do you think, based on the, experience, good experience in other cities, what do you think we can bring to Buffalo to either accelerate the growth, make the change, just like make the positive impact on the community?
I think just one basic thing is just making sure there's access to free internet. Cities like Seoul, Tel Aviv, they have, that's available, and we have a whole generation and more generations coming up, and just to have that easy access is just a spark that'll, let a lot of this stuff, and people are going to have these ideas, and, for them to see other things, and that communication, collaboration, seeing what's out there. For most people, it's seeing it from, unfortunately, a screen, but just having easy access to that.
I think as a city, just showcasing what we are willing to do to create a smart city, different things like that, right? And so people want to move into places and spaces that have really great technology. It's funny, I live right around the corner, and I come up to my building, and we have this new, you have to scan yourself in, and they're testing new technology, and they send all the residents this email, and they're like, we're testing this new technology. I'm like, oh, this is great. And so I'm sitting there at work one day because we have this whole new system on our door, and my phone is ringing. I'm like, what in the world is that? And I was like, oh, it's a FedEx guy right on my phone, and I'm talking to him like through my phone. And so, and as simple as that might sound, right? So when you move into a city or you move into a building or a residence, you want to know, wow, okay, they're pretty hip on the technology. This is pretty cool. And so, just looking at security and safety and how do we maneuver as a city, and how willing are we to move into pulling into new technologies into our city, right? We can't do everything, right? And we even talked to a lot of the CIOs about bringing 5G into the city, huge lift, huge financial lift on top of that. But I think people want to move where they know that the town is going to be a bit more progressive as it pertains to technology. So I think if we can really be, sort of leaders in that space, I think that it shows people, I definitely wouldn't mind working and living within the city.
Yeah, I'll say one thing that I think shouldn't come here to Buffalo is the salary argument that we were hearing about earlier. I think that the trade-offs and the quality of life benefits that you can get from moving to a place like Buffalo with the redevelopment opportunity that exists, you can leapfrog ahead in terms of lifestyle that could be developed into the city, that is already being developed into the city, and people don't necessarily need to go following that crazy salary because they can come here just because it's that much better of a quality of life, and they might be a tech worker, and they can work from pretty much everywhere. Everybody's working from home right now anyway. So one of the other things that I do think would be good that people could bring to Buffalo is this competitive consensus and knowing that it's great to be competitive, and all these startups are out there spinning up a lot of great competition against each other. I think it would be great if craftspeople could come together a little bit more and say, we're all in this industry together, we're all in this craft together, and we're all going in the same direction. And I want to say it's a competitive advantage if you have somebody that's in the same space as you, but you know, for example, they might do something just a little bit better than you and you don't have capacity. Don't like bogart that contact, share that with that other person, because it's just going to benefit everybody long term. So think more about like the big craftsmanship community.
I think that's a great point, because we talk about the concept of placemaking, and you can think about it from a physical space perspective, but also placemaking for people to practice their craft, practice their profession. And then to go back to the comments around space and placemaking. And so when I go to places like Pittsburgh or Salt Lake City, or name Boston, name any number of cities, you go there and you have this, you feel this real sense of place, right? You feel an ecosystem. You walk the streets, you want to be there, you want to be out at night on the streets. And Buffalo is making some really tangible steps to get there, but we still have a ways to go. We have pockets of really vibrant neighborhoods, so Allentown, Elmwood, the revitalization occurring at Canal Side and downtown, but we have to be able to connect that, because I probably sound like a broken record, but we go back to that ecosystem concept, right? And attracting the talent, the companies, such that, like, think of this as an entrepreneur, right? And you come to Buffalo, you want to feel like you can be on your third try at a company, and if it still doesn't work out, there's a safety net there to capture you and wrap their arms around you and embrace you still as a member of this tech and innovation community.
So I feel like there's like this little gap between tech workers and non-tech workers in Buffalo. So we shouldn't emulate Silicon Valley, because Buffalo is a unique ecosystem and it's beautiful. But things we can learn, like few things. For example, last month I went to a conference, and University of Southern California has like this program where they have socially assistive robots, and they got like the non-tech public to be involved in their project, in data collection and in all other efforts, so that it was mainly focused for autistic kids, but that brought like people in non-tech fields together, and they have to feel belonging to tech in some way. So I guess that's one of the things that could happen and that we can learn from others.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone who's just starting out, maybe switching careers, maybe they just fresh out of the high school, university, what would that advice would be?
Well, I always tell my new staff a couple different things, but one is there's never a stupid question. So, encourage that curiosity. And the other that's gotten me through a lot of things is, and you said it as well, just learning from your failures. Don't be afraid to fail. I think every one of us, we had things in common of taking things apart, putting things together, but kind of getting thrown in that deep end of the ocean and then like, okay, I got this, I can swim. And really also just using your voice. I'm fortunate I do have a company where our leadership is women. But we're a very diverse company, and I do find myself in my position being usually the only person, the only woman at the table. Only thing I like about tech conferences is that there's no wait at the bathroom. But I think as a woman, it's really important, and I struggled with this, when I got promoted into a higher leadership position of, I belong here. My voice needs to be heard. It's an important voice. I have good ideas, and to not back down even when you're ignored or looked past. And we have to admit that happens sometimes. You're in a room, and it's just constantly standing up for yourself, because it's not just you, it's everybody behind you.
I think I'd definitely echo that also too. My goodness, raise your hand, right? Raise your hand for opportunities, for projects, things that will push you out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times we don't raise our hands, and when you raise your hands, you mentioned about salary. It's not going to always come with an immediate salary return, right? It's about what can I learn and how can I grow. And I mean, I would have never thought that I would be a CIO and a vice president. It's not something just like, I want to do that for a living, you know? So wasn't that cut and dry for me at any means, but I do think that because I did raise my hand, look, I'm a marketer by trade. I would have never gotten into tech. And, you know, just finding that love because I did raise my hand. And I think the second thing that I would highly recommend is just making sure you look out for each other, really advocate for each other. And I think those would be the main two things that I would really think about. You know, I'm constantly on the phone with other folks that have been in my past, and I use them as resources as I do my day-to-day job, but I also am thinking about other folks that I interact with and say, wow, this person would be really great for this job. And then you say, hey, do you know this job is available? This would be a really great fit for you. Because sometimes people don't know what they don't know and are exposed to what they don't see. And so just, again, raising your hand, advocating for yourself, and then making sure you're helping to give back and elevate others.
One of the things I think somebody just starting out could do is practice getting super uncomfortable constantly, so that it feels like nothing. You just brush it off your shoulder at some point. Practice getting super uncomfortable and recognize that learning in tech is a non-stop, lifelong thing that you just commit yourself to. And if you're looking around the room and you know the same things that everybody in the room knows, and maybe you're all at the same level, you're probably not going to be learning from that crowd. You might need to move on and make yourself uncomfortable in a completely new crowd. So don't be afraid to do that and find some new unique people. And you can learn stuff from all kinds of people at all different levels. It's not always about surrounding yourself with the most senior person doing the most interesting project that they can't talk about.
This isn't my practical piece of advice, but what I do want to say, and I will get to it, but what I do want to say is so imposter syndrome is a real thing. And I know that there's a lot of research behind this, but it's something that I, to this day, still feel at some element in my job every single day, right? So I'm the youngest person on the leadership team. I didn't have a background in tech, and so I have to remind myself every single day that I'm at this table for a reason, and I bring value, and I need to raise my hand, and I need to be more assertive, and I need to be more confident. But I was really fortunate that I had some other women in my life as mentors who were willing to be vulnerable and share their own experiences with feelings of like, I don't belong, and for me to understand that this was normal and that I should push through this. And it sounds very simple, but just as women leaders, being willing to be vulnerable with each other and talk about these experiences so you don't feel like you're out of left field. And you do know, yes, you're going to put yourself in this position and it's going to feel awful and you're going to feel uncomfortable. But you know what? It's going to get better each and every day. So I struggled with this question a little bit because of the practical. I was like, oh, I have to do something practical for somebody. So like, what could you actually do? But I think one of the things, when I've been in a position where I had the option to make a decision, I was probably riskier, put myself out on the limb. Like the unknown and what could go wrong seems so overwhelming. So I've gotten into this habit of like writing down what could go wrong, and then writing down what could go well. And that very act of forcing myself to pause and do that usually makes me realize that the what can go wrong is actually not that bad, or that I've really over-exaggerated it in my mind. So if that gives anyone a technique or a practical technique to walk away with, maybe that would help.
Beautiful points. I do agree with all of this. And adding to that, I would say like 3 things. Like we should, anyone starting new or even anyone in the field already, we should gather new information and then we should share that information with others and we should just implement it. So investing time in more useful ways is very important. So invest your time for innovation and just don't be afraid of failures. Just keep doing it. Just be ready for failures.
So we have one last question and then we're going to open it to Q&A. So this question was not on the list that I sent you, so I wanted to throw a little curveball. It's not that bad.
If you could make a bumper sticker with the one phrase about yourself, what would it say? Well, I guess it wasn't that question.
I'm going to use my voice, and nothing's impossible. That's like that. I think, oh wow, that's pretty good. I'm not that good right now. Well, I have my tag on my car says tech chick. That's like that in hashtag tech chick. But I'm also, for work, I'm VP with Mohawk. So there's that. So maybe I can have a couple of things that are going to change.
If I had to pick a phrase, it would probably also be one that I used for my handle for a long time. Please don't Google it. I would probably just use the word resonate.
How many words do I get? I think, oh man, I'm not good on the spot, but never a dull day, I think, because you want to keep life exciting. And
I think right now in my life there is never a dull day at all, and I tell the team that constantly, resiliency. Hey guys, the worst thing that could happen is life being boring, so never a dull day.
So what next?
Well, thank you so much to our awesome speakers. Let's give them a round of applause. So we open the floor to you, awesome audience. Yes.
Hi, thank you. It was very inspiring to listen to all of you speak. Okay, so you can pick. Would you like my more positive question or my more negative question? Both? Okay, maybe we'll start with one and then we'll give other people. Anyway, okay, so my positive one. If you were born and raised roughly in this geographic area, and let's imagine for all of you that in 10 years, Buffalo is a thriving tech hub, and we are on the list of, it was a second-tier city and now it's first-class tech talent. What is one thing that you do not want to see leave Buffalo? Because inevitably, when you change into a community that has a big tech presence, things happen. Homelessness increases because prices increase with some of those higher salaries we've talked about. Traditional demographics that have thrived in the city, they fade away. Maybe they start by moving to suburbs, one particular suburb, and then they end up moving altogether. Those things happen, and they have happened to other cities when they become tech presences. So what is something that you love about Buffalo that you do not want to see go, that you want us to hold on to, that will distinguish us from those other places? So if you lived here, I sure hope you can think of it, because you've had a while. And even if you're brand new, you probably have some spark that made you willing to move to Siberia. So what is it? Yeah.
I think this could be a selling point besides that the weather's okay. But it's the arts and culture here. I'm Buddhist, and the main parts of that are, peace, culture, and education. And I would not want to lose any one of those, but especially the arts and culture community here is just incredible. It's growing as well. I would hope it would grow along with technology.
For me, it'd be sense of community. So when I first came here, I used to work in Washington, D.C., so fast-paced, always moving. People aren't really necessarily always thinking about each other. So when I came to Buffalo, I remember distinctively going to Wegmans, because I went to Wegmans every single day for 7 days straight, because I was like, this is great. And then I got my food delivered with Instacart. I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. No, but seriously, for me, it was about the community. So when I went to Wegmans, just everybody was just so nice. And I was like, everybody's so nice here. And I'm thinking, I'm just, I'm overly sensitive to it. And everybody was so incredibly nice here. So for me, I think just to not lose our sense of community and really supporting each other. I think that's really important.
I'm going to double down on what she said, because I mean, I came from some of those tech hubs that you're talking about where the community just felt like it was at a loss because they lost generations of people's families, and it was really something to behold in some of those spots. So I double down absolutely on community and being able to maintain that long term culturally, family wise, like that's super important.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than like if we felt like we were no longer the city of good neighbors, I think that would be really sad.
I like the tight network here. Like everybody knows everybody else, so I don't want that thing to change. Also, I guess work-life balance. So when I used to work in San Diego, that was like way too different. It was very fast-paced, and I guess I like the work-life balance here.
I'm gonna add, I don't want to lose our traffic-free streets. Yes, such a relief when you come back from New York City. It's like, oh my God, feels so good. So, do you have another question? Okay, all right.
This doesn't have to be specific to technology, but because you all have had very different career paths. What's one memory that in your career that has kept you going, that is kind of like that pinnacle of like, I want to be empowered and I want to keep moving forward? It could be a negative experience or a really positive experience of being a woman or a minority, or just very special moment in your career.
I think that was a loaded question. So I have a negative experience and a positive experience, and for me, I learned how I wouldn't, as a leader, treat someone on my team. I think that came to me loud and clear. But I never forget, I worked at GW Law School for a number of years when I was getting my graduate degree, and I had a boss I worked downstairs in the basement, and this is no lie, I worked next to the computer guys. Who knew? That was great. They were awesome. And for me, my boss would come down every single day. He was a dean, and he came down and he said, "Is there anything I can do for you today?" And so I never forgot. And I'm 22. I'm a secretary, no less, and because you don't think of yourself as sort of in that mindset being important enough for somebody to come and have that conversation with you. But he valued everyone in the organization. And so I always think about that. I never forget when I was at Buffalo State and I was speaking to one of our facilities guys, and I said to him, "Thank you so much for what you do." And he looked at me, he was like, and I was like, "I'm very serious. It takes all of us. So it doesn't matter what your role is in an organization. You have to value everyone in the organization. That's why they're there." So that was a huge takeaway for me.
I have an example that's not specific to me. It's something I actually observed with my mom. So my mom is a retired physician. She was a solo practitioner. She's a gynecologist. And before she retired, when you are retiring, you make the decision to transfer your practice. She hosted this event for her patients, if they wanted to come, to meet the practice that was taking over her practice, and also just a celebration and a way to thank women who had been patients of hers for decades. And so I was there along with the rest of my family, and we held this event in a large armory. And I didn't expect this going into it, but it was so impactful because they recognized me as her daughter, and so many women came up to me over the course of the evening and said, "Your mom was so impactful for these reasons, and she saved my life," or "She made this meaningful difference." And I actually ended up going up into the balcony and could see this line of hundreds of women waiting to say, "Thank you so much," or whatever variation of that. And it hit me very profoundly that the impact that my mom had on all of these women. And I say this and I get kind of emotional because it was such a powerful moment. And I said, if I live a life that is half as successful and impactful as my mom, it will have been meaningful. And that's what I strive for. So when I think about my career and the impact that I can have, I think of that moment and I think of that view and understand nothing is more important to me than being able to make the world a little bit better for the people I serve, no matter what that group of people is. But that was something I will never forget, that moment and how it has influenced my decisions since then.
somehow I have a similar mother story to share. So my mom was like a tech woman in 1980s, but she had to quit her job due to like a lot of factors, The society was not supportive and she didn't have a work-life balance. And those factors were like very tough to fight in such early stages. She wanted to be revolutionary, but there are reasons why she was not able to, mainly due to the society. But that's when, growing up, I was looking at her life, and that's when I decided I'm never going to stop.
I think I have two moments that really stick out in my mind that keep me going now. One of them was when I was on a team with a lot of practitioners who really valued my opinion. And then I had meetings ongoing with senior leadership who had basically influence over our roadmap, and there was one person who continually would talk over me constantly, regardless of what I was saying. And one day I realized I would just keep talking anytime he did that. And it made the rest of the room realize what was happening as I kept doing it. So I found kind of my voice that day, which was interesting. So now if you cut me off, I'm just going to keep talking if you're that kind of person. The other thing I think was the day that I learned how important it is to know your users and know that you're not your users and understand who you're creating products and experiences for. I was giving a presentation to a large room of people who I hadn't done research with, and I was presenting this, what I thought was a great idea, and by the time I got through the end of my presentation, I'm looking around the room and seeing people's faces, and what I didn't realize at the time was that I was automating a large number of these people probably out of their job, and I had no idea. And I didn't talk to my stakeholders about it, and that was one of the biggest learning lessons early on in my career, which has completely changed how I practice today, and I'm never going to forget that.
I did definitely have amazing parents. It's hard to follow that, but my dad, he taught me one word, and that was a lot of words, but the biggest one is perseverance. And it's something you just have to have in your, side pocket wherever you go. I joined our DBA group in '98, so I had a long run of things. We had a boss who left, asked to leave, but I had been groomed pretty much, anything, disaster recovery here, figure it out, all kinds of things with the server, figure it out. And when he left, our director came to me and he said, "We really want you to step up to this. Can you do it?" And I immediately just said yes in that moment because I knew what I'd been through, I knew what I'd done, and I'm so glad I did because now I feel like I'm in a position where I'm letting my staff take care of things, which was hard for me. Like, where's my phone? And she can attest, nights, weekends, everything. So teaching right now is where a lot of my heart is, and that's why I love where she got Ramona. And that's the other good part of it too is Quinn was one of my staff people, and to see where she is, where she's gone to. I've had summer interns come back to the company. My friend Lena, actually her mother had brought me into the database group, but she went on to do CGI and all these Godzilla and X-Men and all this stuff, and she went back with us, so that was kind of cool. But it's seeing that generation and when they were little, and now they're in their 30s, and all the new people coming in. So that's where my heart is.
For me, it was a conversation that I had with the project manager actually in my team a few weeks ago. She joined our team a few months, and she came from another tech company, and like something that she sent me is just like really it was. Just like a big moment for me as a leader of the company, as a leader of the team. She said, "Lena, this is like the very first time in a very long time when I wake up in the morning and I'm excited about the work that we're going to be doing, because I'm excited about all these, innovative things we're working on, and just like the, challenges that come our way, and because the company also care about, me growing personally." And it's just like, I don't know, it was like such a big moment for me that, I don't know, I might shed a tear. But it's just like, Now, elevating my team and making sure that I'm there for them, this is what gets me out of the bed every morning. Like, I'm so pumped just like to start every day knowing that we're like working on something cool together, building amazing products, and it's just, amazing feeling, being in this together as a team. Alrighty, next question. All right, I saw Jana, so you raise the hand first.
Thanks, Lena, and you're included. I'd like each one of you to name the first language you would like to speak or sign that you don't already know.
So, the first language, not the programming language, anyway. I don't know, I've been trying to learn Italian, so that's on my to-do list. My dream is to travel to Italy and speak just Italian, so working on my Duolingo skills.
Gallifreyan? Anybody? No. Okay. Doctor Who fan. Yes, see, thank you. I would say Italian. That was, we've traveled. We would love to we tried to, but yeah, finding that time to do things. But I would have to say, I took years of Spanish, but I would really love to be fluent in that.
I would say Spanish. My father is from Panama, and when he came over to the U.S., his mother wouldn't let him speak Spanish because she wanted him to assimilate. So at 7, he really lost all of that. So I would love to be able to learn how to speak Spanish more fluently.
I'm going to have to say a language that I should know because I took some classes in it early on, but I don't know, unfortunately, Bahasa Malaysia. I lived there for a while. It's a beautiful language. I'd really love to be fluent in it, but it just did not stick. So that'd be a good one.
I'd like to learn Farsi. My dad is Iranian, and I still have a lot of family that lives there. And so I've grown up having wonderful relationships, but always having to speak with a translator in between. So I'd love to be able to speak Farsi.
I'd like to learn Sanskrit. It's like 6,000 years old. It's an Indian language that's kind of being forgotten nowadays. I attempted learning when I was in school, but I think I should be serious about it.
So this is kind of a thought I've had floating around for a while, so it's not fully developed, so I'm sorry about that. But Amber did mention sort of the legislating and mandating, bringing people into tech. And of course, my first reaction to that is, of course, like, hell yeah, like, let's get them in and like make sure people are doing this. But I also worry that it does contribute to a lot of the feelings that we have about imposter syndrome and feeling like, am I here because I earned it or because there's a quota? And I guess if anyone wants to comment on that, or in general on ways to not bring women or minorities into tech, but make them want to be there and make it a more welcoming space for them to come to on their own.
So there's like a study that's interesting that shows like when you ask a man why he is successful, he probably says because I'm talented, I'm competent. But usually women, though they are competent and equally talented, it's hard for them to take the credits. They normally attribute to the others or to the role models or to people who, because of whom they are the place where they are. So I think that's one of the reasons, that's just like one of the qualities that also we all have to work on. Just be confident and just take the credits.
So that's a really good question, and it's a really hard question too. So I don't know the answer. I think that ideally we would be in a place where women would feel welcomed in any profession and come to the table. I don't think we're there yet, right? So I think in parallel we need to pursue those paths that make people of all groups feel included and like they have a place at the table. Part of that, though, is being able to see themselves in those more senior leadership positions, which I think is, until we get there, that's where some of the legislation assists, right? And so, yes, I think that feeling of imposter syndrome is definitely a reality. Am I only here because there was a quota to fill? But I think there's two parallel paths that have to go. There's the legislation aspect and a focus on that, but then there's also the true work that occurs to make people feel like they have a spot at the table.
Yeah, I think legislating inclusion is still going to leave some of us with that feeling of imposter syndrome constantly. I know I'm never going to shake it, but I have had the experience of being like the token female lunch buddy on an interview loop, and because there's literally nobody else in the department, right? Uncomfortable, but I'll do it because I want more women to work within my community. So that being said, I do think there is something that people could do in terms of inclusion and accommodating variable communication styles. For example, if you're having a hot topic debate on your team and only two people speak up, they're the same people that constantly speak up, you can nudge folks in the meeting to say, hey, can you give me your feedback? Or let them provide feedback online. Some people aren't comfortable having those emotionally charged conversations in real life. Some people might need some alternative access to the way that they communicate. So email, text, chat, those things are also more inclusive, apart from just having that alternative identity like in the room, being more inclusive with the access and communication style stuff.
I would say, too, allowing someone to feel like they truly are included, right? And so that comes to learning when to stop talking and listen to folks. I think a lot of times people don't listen to others. They're so busy trying to sort of get their point across that they're not allowing that other person to allow for feedback. Those diverse conversations are really, really important in the room. I always say I can learn from all. You know, I learn from my admin every day. I learn from my leadership team every day. I learn from my president every day. And so I think it's just really about making sure that you're listening. So I'll leave that to the side, but then there's the other conversation about being an African-American female in tech. And so some people say, well, don't you often feel like you're the token in the room? And I said, keep in mind that may be why that they felt that I should be in the room, but I get that same meaningful experience as anyone else around that table. And so to your point about making sure that especially our students see folks like them, you know, at the table, that's where I go. You know, I'm there to have a voice as well. I have something to contribute that can be meaningful to the conversation. So it's important to understand and know when you can really capitalize on those times in a meaningful, intentional way. So it doesn't become a negative, that it really turns into a positive. So for me, again, I sit at the table. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here. Okay, well, you know, and so you really just have to take the opportunity to just say, you know what, I'm at the table. I'm going to use it. And I'm going to make it an opportunity to grow myself and learn from other people. And so it's just as your opportunity, I think, as well as women, you know, slay it, you know, get in the room and show them what you got. We've got skills, you know, we've got things to be able to contribute. And I think that we need to show people and not kind of sit back sometimes and say, well, I'm not going to say that, or I'm not going to share because I'm kind of sitting here, I'm a little intimidated. You know, sometimes, you know, you may get a look like, oh, she knows her stuff. Well, a lot of us know our stuff, you know, and we can contribute to meaningful conversation.
I think it's really important to just also listen, but have those conversations and really learn different cultures. I did grow up with parents that were very, you have to work 200% because they're just going to see an Indian, you know, so, okay, we were pushed, and I'm glad we were, but it also brought a lot of heavy baggage. You know, am I good enough? Like just that whole core that we all have. Anybody has that. But I think I was lucky enough to be in nonprofit world where there was a lot of diversity and inclusion and empowerment, and those conversations were happening. So I embraced my matriarchal roots and was able to develop, you know, management skills and, you know, really including people. And I do have to, you know, to this day have conversations with upper leadership when we've had a few people struggle, and I'll listen, but then I'll have to point out, well, you do have to understand in this culture, you know, they were probably, you know, fighting all this other internal stuff, and you do see people burning themselves out because they're trying so hard to prove themselves. So I think it's recognizing that, helping, you know, women, everybody in your company and recognizing those things.
I want to address the imposter syndrome part of the question. It's just like so hard to shake off that feeling, and it's just like crazy. You don't know where it comes off. And through the just like the lifetime of me being an entrepreneur, being in the tech field, it just I've seen really talented people, but I also seen people that have been doing a way worse job than I am. When I thought I might not know enough, I'm not good enough. I've seen people that doing way worse, like websites or whatever, digital products, and being more successful or charging more, that I got to the point that I got so pissed off, and I don't know, like kick that imposter syndrome in the butt. It's just like I got fed up feeling, it's just sometimes you have to get to that point where you're like so pissed off at the world, at somebody, that it pushes you to that next level. So yeah. Right. Was there somebody else in that corner? Yeah.
So getting to the position that you're in now, which do you think influenced you more getting there, education or experiences? Because I feel like a lot of people, they go to school, they get their degree in something, and then they either work in that completely or they completely shift. Like people have gotten management degrees and then they end up going to med school or doing something strange.
Over this, so we need to do a duet at the end. Definitely experience. I started out pre-law. My path was, my parents had decided, said to my sister, "Are you going to be a doctor or a concert pianist?" She crushed at both, so she had to decide. And then, I decided early on I wanted to go for law, but that changed when I was at Houghton. Just having those conversations, and I knew for me it didn't fit me. So I, wound up in the nonprofit world. But definitely the experiences. I did, I had a long educational path of here and there, and I love learning. I love knowledge. It is power. But I think the experiences, good and bad, changing those, bad situations. In Buddhism we call it, changing poison into medicine. And taking that and, okay, this is what I've learned. Pick myself up. This is what I've learned. So I just experience and education together. If you have all that, it's amazing.
I think for me, it's actually both. So I think it depends on your field that you're in. So for me, being in higher ed for the majority of my career, it's higher ed, right? And so as we move up into our roles, we really have to make sure we have those credentials. So for me, again, non-traditional path. I have my bachelor's is in marketing, my master's is in project management, my doctor is in educational leadership. And so kind of, spans sort of this very interesting eclectic path. But for me, knowing that I wanted to get into higher level administration in higher ed, that for me, and what I used to do as far as marketing and even being a CIO, I don't necessarily need to have a doctorate. I definitely need to have a master's, but I don't have to have a doctorate. So for me, it was a personal goal that wound up being advantageous for me long term. So I would really, as much as you can, stress understanding what field you want to enter into and what the requirements are for the educational piece, because you don't always necessarily have to have the higher level degrees. And tech more specifically, right? I mean, you could have stackable certifications. There's a number of things that you can do to sort of earn that street cred without having a sort of very formalized degree. We also kind of live in a more forgiving space than in tech, I would say outside of higher ed, because you can really partake of that level of experience. So they may forego a master's degree for X number of years of experience. That's not so heavily utilized in higher ed. At my institution, certain roles you have to have a master's. You wouldn't become faculty if you didn't have the credentials to do that. So it just depends on your field.
I think my experience with education was a little bit different. There wasn't a degree for the field that I ended up going into, and I had a habit of just taking a job regardless of what it was paying or where it was. and dragging my husband around, just so that I could learn something from that particular role, because I thought it was a skill set that I personally wanted to add to my toolkit over time. That being said, I also was considered a special education student throughout my early education. So there were some folks that didn't even think I was going to graduate high school. And then I went on, got a Bachelor's of Science, a BA, went on for my Master's. You know, my career's doing just fine. So whatever they thought about me at the time didn't mean much. My relationship with education's a little skeptical. But I definitely think experience is super important, and you can get the exact same kind of qualifications as you can from a 4-year degree on the job. And I'm a little disappointed in some places that hire just based on the paper that you get from an institution. And I think there's a lot of employers that are moving away from that, which I invite, because I've seen a lot of amazing and brilliant people that have gotten passed up because they had 10 years of on-the-job experience, but they didn't have a BA. No.
Yeah, if we think about the continuous learning environment that you're in with tech, how rapidly it changes, that's making us shift our approach to tech, to education in general, right? They say now a CS graduate, I think like by the time they graduate, half of what they learned in school is no longer relevant. But I think it's both, right? I get the question a lot like, oh, you're not practicing law anymore. Do you regret spending that time in law school? And the answer to that is no. I mean, there is no substitute to practical experience, but also what helped me and what I take away from my educational experience is that like I approach things with a really critical, detail-oriented approach that had I not gone to law school, I wouldn't have that advantage. But then I also have the benefit of the MBA such that that kind of helps you back out and look at the bigger picture and understand the team components of things, right? So that just happened to be where my education focused between the two degrees, but it ends up being, there's still, I will say, no substitute for that practical experience. And if there was something I could go back and do differently, it's that I wish I did take a year off between undergrad and grad school, but I would have liked more of that worker perspective, that in the workforce mentality and perspective to how I approached my schooling, because at the time it was very much focused on grades, right? Because you're in the top 10% of your law class, you will get certain interviews with certain firms. And reflecting back on it, the grades, while important to get you in the door, at the end of the day, do not determine who will be a successful attorney, who will be a successful business person, a successful technologist. And there's a gap there when we think about education in the workforce.
So I see education as like a booster. So you get exposure to like different fields in tech as a whole. You get like a broad knowledge. After that, experience matters on what you're really doing. So it's like a mix of both.
I would want to take a step back and would say a mindset. Applying having the certain skills that you apply to both to education, getting through the school, and also succeeding in your career, whether it's tech career, or any other career, but especially in tech career, being self-driven, being curious, always, wanting to learn better yourself, being able to overcome challenges and staying optimistic when, times get rough, being able to push yourself through those challenges. Those kind of like the fundamentals of, being successful, whether you have, formal education or you're self-taught developer. So, last question. All right, and we're gonna wrap up.
So I'm going to come at this. So as a father of 3 daughters, a couple things. So you're often the odd voice in the room. So you walk into that room and it's all filled with guys, and you want to offer this diverse opinion. How do you do that in a way that doesn't immediately reject you? So that's kind of question 1. And then 2 is a little bit different, but it kind of leads into it. So my daughter just resigned from a position because of a bad female boss. So, and it was because the female boss felt like she had to outmale the men in the organization, so kind of kept her down. So.
All right, loaded question. All right. Any takers?
So I think in regards to having a voice in the room, just making sure that I think sometimes you want to be mindful not to overcompensate. Yes, you can be the only female in the room, but if you know your stuff, you should be in good shape at the end of the day. Even if it's something that you don't necessarily know, to say, wow, I like an opportunity to learn how to do that. Would you help be my mentor? Things like that. So I think there are techniques and tricks that you can implement while you're sort of at the table, where you can really be there to give your knowledge and your skill set, but also to say, hey, I'd be happy to learn that as well. And so I think that's interesting. In regards to the female boss, sort of that need to be a little bit more aggressive because you're in a male-dominated field. I had a boss like that, and I made the decision after just being on the job for a year to leave that environment because she was always sort of in this very competitive mode. And for me, I knew that wasn't the leadership for me. And I think sometimes we have to we can get into jobs, we have to acknowledge that maybe something's not a good fit, and that it's okay to acknowledge that it's not a good fit and to move on. And so, for me, in that case, that's what I chose to do. I chose to move on and moved into a really wonderful and amazing role at another institution. And so I think you just have to really understand and know what your landscape is, what the culture is. Is somebody, holding that person to task and saying, hey, take it easy on that person, or that's a little aggressive, as you're moving forward. And so I think understanding and knowing the culture of your environment and what they truly support, are they willing to support you or not? But I think we need to be unapologetic for acknowledging when something isn't a good fit. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, still thinking about that one.
So the question around how can you make your voice heard in the room and how the experience is in reverse. I think I've facilitated committee meetings at the bank sometimes where I am one of two women in the room. Maybe there's like 20 or so people. It depends. And what I found is that you test and learn. I tried some scenarios where I would put ideas on the table, and the next thing I know, someone said the same thing, and I was like, wait a second, and clearly what I said hadn't resonated, hadn't landed, hadn't been heard. So I had to study, right? And so figure out, and when I say study, I mean observe and think about the soft skill training that I had, right? So it had to understand like this particular, and it's male or female actually, like this particular leader, this is their communication style, and this is how my ability to communicate will resonate most with them. So this leader over here is like the bullet points. They don't want the context. They just want the 30-second version. This leader over here actually needs the contexts, because if not, they're going to take you down a rabbit hole with these questions. And it's like, it's a practiced art, and I have a lot of opportunity to get better at it, but I think that's maybe that's helpful advice. I don't know. I also think of when I was a daughter, like in a teenager. I don't know if your girls are teenagers, but like I wasn't listening to my dad no matter what he said. So I feel for you. So, and then on the second point, so I think it's interesting when you look at female leaders. So some of the advice I had gotten when I was thinking about leadership, and this is from male mentors in my life, was that, and the way this is going to come out is going to sound terrible, but they said like one of your weaknesses is going to be how much you care, right? Like you need to be tougher, you need to be more domineering wasn't the word, but you need to be more confident in the way you execute and take away some of that, what is perceived as indecision. And that is the model of success in a lot of companies, right? And so if you think about women who have gotten to very senior positions in companies, if that was how they had to adapt themselves in order to succeed, then in some ways I think that explains the situation that maybe your daughter found herself in. And I think then I've been in situations where I had a boss and the alignment wasn't there, and you reach a decision point. You either feel comfortable to sit down and have a very candid conversation with them, or alternatively you realize this doesn't work for me, which sounds like was the conclusion there, and you look for that next opportunity. But it's hard, and there's no good answer at the end of the day.
Fortunately, I had a lot of male mentors, good mentors, so that shaped me who I am today. So also, I always try to be in a positive environment, and I kind of stay away from the toxic environments. So to your second question, maybe I would have done the same. I would have tried for some time to be soft-spoken and to make people believe me, to make people have confidence in me. But if it doesn't work after a certain point of time, I would just leave the toxic environment.
For me, I think I've had an opportunity to be in an organization where there is an extremely strong and some might say aggressive female leader at the helm. And I found that attractive at some point. And then I also found myself feeling bad about my own accomplishments after a while when I was trying to follow in those footsteps. And that's when I realized that that's not the type of model for me. And it took me a while to learn that. And then I went to an organization where the female leadership was completely different. The culture was completely different, much more inclusive. And I learned what good female leadership looked like in that particular role. But at the time, when I still felt like I needed to be more competitive, I threw myself into that competitive environment. I went into parliamentary debate and learned how to argue as best as the rest of them, kind of thing. And that ultimately didn't help me. It helped me track a conversation and win an argument long term, but it doesn't help me build bridges and win partners long term. And building those relationships, being data driven, and not being aggressive to the point of detracting from somebody else's ability to get their job done, that's a different skill that you have to learn long term. So.
For me, it's definitely building a dialogue. And you mentioned one of my favorite things of it. You know, you need to listen to each other. And I would find myself in these conversations kind of, you know, trying to get in the conversation, but it was being driven by all these different people. So I finally had to, you know, use my voice and force it to become a dialogue in a very delicate way. Not delicate, but just, you know, kind of control what you can. And I did find one of my pet peeves, and everybody I think at my company knows, I hate being talked over or interrupted if I'm mid-thought. And you all know when you're at the table and, you know, and everybody's trying to get their idea out there and, you know, whatever. And I drew the line, basically said, I really would like for you to listen to me. I'll do that with people, you know, people on the phone, whatever. I just need you to listen to me for a minute. And then it's much more of a quicker, productive dialogue. Second point with your daughter and the horrible boss, we've pretty much all had that. And, you know, I think for her, because she will be in leadership, take that lesson of like how to, for me, the biggest thing I feel like I've developed over the years is to be approachable. If somebody's having an issue, somebody's struggling, it's like, don't spin your wheels, my door is open, you know, come on in, let's figure this out. Or, you know, if they mess something up, it's going to happen. And, you know, touching a server, bringing it down, you know, it's nitroglycerin. It's like, yeah, and it's like getting their confidence. So, you know.
To answer the second half of the question about having that boss from hell, I think it comes from also having a good perspective what the leadership, like proper leadership, looks like. You know, especially, you know, since we see like also like different how men and women come across as the leaders in their roles, like when they act aggressive, also being perceived differently, right? Men are being perceived more like authoritarian and kind of like as a granted, right? It's even expected, and women, you know, come across as, you know, bitchy. You know, women that lead, right? If the leaders in front of them were males, and that was their leadership style, right? So it's just natural that they're going to kind of adapt to the same style. But you know, it's well known that you know, you don't have to be that typical type of leader where you're like extroverted, loud, maybe a little bit more on the aggressive side. So just like finding your personal leadership style, like whether you're introvert, are you, you know, woman, man. So just like finding what's working on your personal level, you know, without being aggressive, and actually being more compassionate and being open to listening to your team. That's definitely, you know, you win in the long term. So again, creating the proper examples in the leadership, creating, like having more women leading, like having more underrepresented groups in the leadership positions definitely will help to change that moving forward. All right, well, this is a wrap, guys. Thanks, everyone, for being here and supporting and hearing the amazing answers and hearing the experience from our panelists today. So let's give each other a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes.
Just before everybody leaves, I just wanted to take a moment and have all of or first of all, thank all of our panelists for being here. That was phenomenal. You all are very knowledgeable and inspiring women. Also, can we take a chance or take this chance to thank our volunteers and organizers as well who helped make this happen? Yes. They're wearing the blue tags, except for one who is here as a spectator. Okay, and at the same time, some of us at Inclusive Tech Buffalo are also helping organize a conference here called Devops Days. We had one last year that had a great turnout, and we would like to see it coming or see this happen again. We sold out last year, and what is great about this conference is it's not only about DevOps, your infrastructure and programming and anything in between. It's definitely about that, but it also focuses on diversity and inclusion. And so I think this would be a great opportunity, or I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of plug it because early bird tickets are out. Thank you.